that has come down from the governor's original proposal of like 332 to 250, and I'm making the effort to take that down to 160.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that's all part of that bill. I mean,
Yes, it will be an amendment to the school finance bill as we carry it.
Okay.
We had to create. Actually, we put it into law last year. Last year we called it the budget stabilization factor. This year we're renaming it exactly what it is. It's just called the negative factor, where we have a statewide base, and the amount of dollars we should actually be funding is, as the provisions of Amendment 23 dictate, we should have X amount of funding. And then this is the negative factor to say we can't fund to that level. We have to put a negative factor in based on our actual dollars available. So. And that's what that 160 will end up being. Across the state, it equates to about 1.7% cut in their actual funding from one year over the next.
I'm sorry, can you explain that 1.7 again?
That's the percentage cut from the funding this year to the funding next year. With the 160 reduction, that equates to a 1.7% decrease in funding.
Okay. Do you know how soon we will know if the cut reduction does pass?
I should know pretty soon. Interestingly enough, it's really caught in kind of a political quagmire at this point, and it's based on part of our budget balancing, because there's still, as part of our budget balancing, we were actually declaring a state emergency, which allowed us to use some of the Amendment 35 cigarette tax dollars to balance the budget. Requires a 2/3 vote in the House. Our Speaker has been holding that up a little bit while they're still negotiating some ancillary things, but that keeps me from being able to complete negotiations with the Governor's office to finalize this plan. So it's kind of a timing issue. As soon as we finalize the budget based on the joint resolution, then I can finalize our efforts to cut the cut with the Governor's office, and then we can actually carry it. What we will do undoubtedly Monday in House Education, we will hear the school finance bill and pass it through on this form. And then the amendments will actually be carried when it comes to the House floor for additional deliberation. And by then we'll have all our agreements in place.
I've heard that somebody thought that would be around May before we would know anything about if the cut reduction is going to happen.
Well, it will be May, because realize that once we make these amendments in the House, which, depending on the timing and making sure everyone is there to vote, and then it has to go back to the Senate for concurrence. Then it has to go to the Governor for signature. So it theoretically could be May.
Okay. Do you think that's a pretty safe estimate?
Probably first week in May, I'd say, for sure.
Okay. I'm sorry, I just have one more question, and you know what the impact would be locally if the cut reduction does? How much would that mean back into the local?
The difference in the cut in Salida would take the cut from 392,665 to 212. In Buena Vista, it would take the cut from 402,875 to 186,155. Sure. Let's make it easy. 393,000 would drop to 212,000 in Salida, and 403,000 in Buena Vista would drop to 186,000.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
We've done a lot of other things, quite honestly, this year in education in particular. I've worked with all the education advocates, and we passed House Bill 1277. We sat down over about a 6-month period and said, let's look at all the things we've done over the past few years, because every time we think we do something well-intentioned, we create another paper trail or another accountability trail or another transparency measure, and all it's amounted to is more and more paperwork for the districts at every level. So we actually looked at all the federal mandates, the state mandates, accountability measures, data collection points, and said, what of this is redundant, what's unnecessary, what are we not using? So we turned into about 80 pages of bill worth of cleanup. It will save the state about $350,000. It will save districts considerable time and money. So we're looking at some of that. I had the opportunity also to carry, turned into a pretty contentious piece of legislation with the ag exemption reclassification. And the whole purpose of that, quite honestly, was we have so many people gaming the system that are claiming an agricultural exemption for property that's not truly in agriculture. And when they do that, it robs our counties of local share of dollars that actually go into school finance. So we were able to push through legislation this year that said we're going to reclassify this, and land that is not truly agriculture for at least the residential portion of that, the land will be reclassified with the residential piece, which theoretically in districts that have gone through what we call de-bruising or revenue keeping elections will be able to keep that revenue and apply it to a local share of school funding. So.
What's that bill number?
Oh, 1046.
Talked a lot about cutting money and the budgets and the problems. Are we doing anything in the legislature to attract more business, to stimulate growth, to put more money into our coffers?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing a number of things, but the sad reality is that a lot of the business model we see now from other states are pretty incentive-laden. And to incentivize business, you have to have pools of dedicated funds that you can direct toward funding those incentives. The way we budgeted Colorado, and again with our constitutional limitations, it would have to be a direct divert from another program as a set-aside, and that becomes very problematic.
Because you're familiar, I'm sure, with the state of Texas.
Yes.
And how they work theirs and the incentives that they
Well,
offer.
and Utah,
and
a number of states around.
Yeah, how can you compete with that? And you're telling me you can.
Well, in today's world, we can't effectively. What we have to do then is create the cleanest regulatory framework we can, where there's the least onerous amount of regulation that small business would have to deal with. So even though there might not be the incentive pool, there's an ease of entry or ease of operation for small business.
Are there bills dealing with that?
Yes, yeah, we've had a number that this year are trying to decrease some of the regulatory hoops that small business have to jump through. But again, it's like everything else. We're throwing nickels at dollar problems. One of my passions has always been film, and I've carried it for 7 years in the legislature, trying to create film incentives to bring filming back to Colorado, and I keep running up against the fact that if we're going to do that, we have to create about a $4 to $5 million fund of monies that would not even be paid till the following year as a rebate on audited actual expenses. But to do that, I'd have to cut money out of education or health care or something else.
A casino and an MMJ facility on every corner.
Yeah, that's been an interesting, a lot of what we do in the legislature are rehashed ideas from one year to the next. And I got roped into carrying the medical marijuana legislation last year with then Senator Romer, and then I'm carrying all the cleanup this year. It's really kind of interesting because it's new ground. I mean, we're really, it's kind of pioneering in the sense that we're creating a model now. I was just called by a reporter with ABC in Phoenix. They're coming in this Thursday or Wednesday to interview us because they're looking at Colorado's model and saying, we want to see this replicated in other states. And I'd love to take some of the credit for that, but most of the credit really goes to some of the gentlemen from the Department of Revenue that did such an outstanding job in promulgating all the rules around what we were trying to do, that it really has become quite the national model now.